3 चैप्टर्स है, फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन, रशियन रिवॉल्यूशन और आपके राइज ऑफ नाजिज्म इन जर्मनी। तो सबसे पहला फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन है, फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन को हम पढ़ रहे थे और फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन में फॉर्मेट हमने पूरा बना लिया था। इसके अलावा हमने फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन के अंदर कुछ चीजें और कर ली थी, क्या क्या थी थोड़ी देख लेते हैं और फिर आगे बढ़ते हैं। अब देखिए फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन को, फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन एज द नेम डिनोट्स फ्रांस में हुआ था। अब फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन के अंदर क्या क्या चीजें हुई थी उसको देखते हैं। सबसे पहला पार्ट हमने जो फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन के अंदर देखा था वो था क्या, इसका वो था आपके इसका फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन का क्या, इंट्रोडक्शन। मैंने इंट्रोडक्शन में आपको क्या क्या चीजें बताई थी। तो देखिए इंट्रोडक्शन में 2-3 चीजें हमने समझी थी। सबसे पहली बात तो थी फ्रांस का मैप, पूरा मैंने आपको समझाया था यहाँ पे। फिर फ्रांस के मैप के साथ साथ में आसपास की कंट्रीज वगैरह भी बताई थी। फ्रांस के आसपास जो देश आए थे, जर्मनी, स्विट्जरलैंड, इटली वगैरह, और उधर आपके अटलांटिक ओशन आ जाता है वेस्ट की तरफ, ये सारा समझाया था मैप में। सेकंड चीज मैंने आपको समझाई थी इसमें बर्बन डायनेस्टी। बर्बन डायनेस्टी फ्रांस का ही एक एथनिक ग्रुप था, उसी की एक डायनेस्टी थी बर्बन डायनेस्टी। 12th सेंचुरी में फ्रांस में ये पावर में आई थी और फिर उसके बाद में कंटिन्यू फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन तक ये लोग पावर में रहे थे। ये डायनेस्टी बेसिकली फ्रांस में ही नहीं बल्कि फ्रांस के अलावा इटली के भी कुछ रीजन थे, जैसे कि 2 किंगडम्स ऑफ सिसिली इटली के साउथ में, वहां पे भी रूल करती थी, स्पेन में भी रूल करती थी और साथ साथ में फ्रांस में भी रूल करती थी। मतलब इन्हीं के डिसेंडेंट्स वगैरह थे जो यहाँ इन एरियाज में रूल करते थे। इसी बर्बन डायनेस्टी का किंग था फ्रांस में। कब की बात है, जब फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन हुआ था। जो किंग था मैंने आपको बताया था लुइस 16 नाम था उसका। और लुइस 16 जो था आपके ऑस्ट्रिया की प्रिंसेस थी जिसका नाम था मारी एंटोनाइट, इससे मैरिड था, इन दोनों की शादी हो रखी थी, बर्बन डायनेस्टी से था। और उस टाइम पे फ्रांस की सोसाइटी का ऑर्डर कैसा था, तो देयर वाज नथिंग लाइक रिपब्लिक जैसा कुछ भी नहीं था, देयर वाज नथिंग लाइक डेमोक्रेसी, बट टोटली द रेजिम वाज ऑटोक्रेटिक मोनार्क रेजिम। मैंने सोसाइटी के बारे में बताया, फ्रेंच सोसाइटी उस टाइम पे किस टाइप की थी, 3 स्टेट्स में बेसिकली बटी हुई थी। द किंग एंड द क्लर्गी क्लास क्रिएट द टॉप मोस्ट स्टेट ऑफ द फ्रांस। Second was the noble class or the nobility, or even we can call them the aristocrat class. And third was the common man or the peasant class. And fourth, which is not mentioned in the book, but I told you about that, the fourth class was the slaves basically, which faces the inhumane treatment. Fourth class was the slave. Slaves doesn't come under this common class because slaves were hired by even some merchants, common people, also by the aristocrats, and also they were hired by the kings. So basically slaves were the another fourth class. These 3 were the categories of the society during the French Revolution or during the 17th and the 18th century. तो सोसाइटी को समझा, बर्बन डायनेस्टी को समझा था, मैप को समझा था, ये चीजें समझ के राजा ये था और मारी एंड से इसकी शादी हो रखी थी। अब इन्हीं कॉमन लोगों ने आपके ये जो किंग था लुई 16 इसके खिलाफ रिवोल्ट करके और फ्रांस के अंदर रिवॉल्यूशन लेके आया था। रिवॉल्यूशन का बेसिकली मतलब ये है कि एक क्लास स्ट्रगल, यानी कि एक पूरा का पूरा वर्ग किसी ऊपर बैठी हुई जो गवर्नमेंट है या उसका मोनार्क है उसके खिलाफ जब आपके प्रदर्शन या प्रोटेस्ट डेमोन्स्ट्रेशन करे अपने अधिकारों के लिए, चाहे वो पॉलिटिकल अधिकार हो, चाहे इकोनॉमिक अधिकार हो, चाहे किसी भी टाइप के हो, तो उसे हम बेसिकली एक रिवॉल्यूशन मानते हैं। तो सोसाइटी इस तरीके की थी, ये डायनेस्टी थी, ऐसा मैप मैंने बताया था, ये चीजें बताई थी। फिर हम आए थे कि एक्चुअली रीजंस क्या क्या थे जिससे कि फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन स्टार्ट हुआ था, वो कौन से। देखिए बहुत सारे रीजंस थे पहले से सोसाइटी में चल रहे थे, फिर लास्ट में कुछ इमीडिएट रीजंस भी आ गए एकदम। तो बहुत सारे रीजन जो पहले से थे और फिर इमीडिएट रीजन दोनों मिलके कंबाइंड हुए और लोग जो है एकदम से आपके क्या हो गए, रिवोल्ट करने लगे किंग के खिलाफ। नाउ वी विल ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट वर द रीजंस बेसिकली। तो देखिए सबसे पहला रीजन कल मैंने आपको बताया था कॉजेज ऑफ द फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन। इसके कॉजेज में सबसे पहला रीजन मैंने आपको बताया था इकोनॉमिक कॉजेज या इकोनॉमिक रीजन। और मैंने ये बताया था कि दुनिया में जितनी भी घटनाएं आज के टाइम पे भी हो रही है, पहले भी हो चुकी है, उनके पीछे चाहे डायरेक्टली मेंशन करो चाहे इनडायरेक्टली मेंशन करो, इकोनॉमिक रीजंस हमेशा जिम्मेदार होते हैं। अगर हम एक और एग्जांपल इसका देखें तो जैसे इस्लामिक वर्ल्ड जो था, जैसे इस्लाम जो धर्म था उसके बाद में 2 सेक्ट में डिवाइड होता है, एक शिया सेक्ट था, एक सुन्नी सेक्ट था। तो सुन्नी आज के टाइम पे 90% है और वो डिवाइड हुए थे, लोग कहते हैं रिलीजियस बिलीफ्स पे डिवाइड हुए थे। ठीक है, लोगों का कहना भी सही है, बट मेरा एक थोड़ा अलग ही मानना है कि रिलीजियस सेक्ट पे भी डिवाइड हुए थे एंड देयर वाज आल्सो इकोनॉमिक रीजन बिहाइंड दैट, क्योंकि सुन्नी वो सेक्ट था जिनके पास में रिसोर्सेज बहुत ज्यादा थी उस टाइम पे। तो इसीलिए सुन्नियों के साथ में ज्यादा लोग थे और शिया के साथ में कम थे। इसकी वैसे बहुत अलग कहानी है, लेकिन एक इकोनॉमिक रीजन रिलीजन में भी था। सेम गोज विद अदर रिलीजन्स एज वेल। तो यहाँ इकोनॉमिक कॉजेस हर जगह प्रिवेलेंट होंगे। तो इकोनॉमिक कॉजेस में मैंने आपको कल बताया था, एक कि अमेरिका की जो 13 कॉलोनीज थी उनको लिबरेट कराने के लिए फ्रांस उनको फंडिंग कर रहा था। किससे लिबरेट कराना था? ब्रिटेन से। और ब्रिटेन और फ्रांस में वैसे भी आपस में नहीं बनती थी। अभी भी कुछ दिन पहले इंग्लिश चैनल को लेकर इन दोनों में आपस में झगड़ा हुआ था। एक चीज। दूसरा, फ्रांस का जो किंग था वो पैलेस बना रहा था, पैलेस ऑफ वर्सेल। बहुत ही मैग्निफिशेंट रिच पैलेस था, अपनी रानी के लिए बना रहा था। और कुछ लोग कहते हैं कि बाहर से लोन लेने के लिए वो ऐसा शो कर रहा था कि भाई ऐसा पैलेस है मेरे पास में, इस तरीके के वो कंस्ट्रक्शन कर रहा है, तो लोग उसको या बाकी स्टेट्स उसको आसानी से और लोन दे सके। तो एक पैलेस भी बनाया था इसने। साथ साथ में एक और दिक्कत थी कि ट्रेजर वैसे भी इनका खाली हो चुका था पूरा का पूरा। फिर जो लोन इन्होंने ले रखे थे लोगों से पहले से ही, उन लोन की पेमेंट भी इनकी ड्यूज थी, वो पेमेंट भी चुकानी थी विथ 10% इंटरेस्ट। ये भी था। इसके अलावा और क्या था? पैलेस ऑफ वर्सेल, ट्रेजर्स, लोन वगैरह, 13 कॉलोनीज। इसके अलावा उसमें जो डेली की उसकी एक्सपेंसेस थी उसको भी उसको मीट करना था। डेली एक्सपेंसेस किसकी? इसकी आर्मी को रन करने की एक्सपेंसेस, कोर्ट को रन करने की एक्सपेंसेस, गवर्नमेंट को रन करने की एक्सपेंसेस, ये सारी जो है ये भी इसको मीट करनी थी। अब इन सब चीजों के कारण फ्रांस की जो इकोनॉमिक कंडीशन है वो आपके वर्स्ट हो गई, या इट गेट वर्सन डे बाय डे। अब ये इकोनॉमिक कॉजेस थे जो कि लोगों को कहीं ना कहीं मजबूर कर रहे थे कि फ्रांस में राजा के खिलाफ रिवॉल्ट करने के लिए। इकोनॉमिक रीजंस के बाद में हम आते हैं सोसाइटी के रीजंस पे। ठीक है, इकोनॉमिक रीजंस, सोसाइटी के रीजंस, पॉलिटिकल रीजंस, फिर बाद में आएंगे कि और ये रीजंस तो थे ही, लेकिन वो एक ऐसा वर्ग भी था जिन्होंने इन लोगों को थोड़ा उकसाया भी। उकसाया इन द सेंस मतलब इनको नई चीजों के बारे में अवेयर किया। वो इंटेलेक्चुअल वर्ग था। उन लोगों ने क्या क्या चीजें लिखी, नई थिंकिंग्स जो सोसाइटी के अंदर लिखे हैं वो भी समझेंगे। अब पहली चीज इकोनॉमिक कॉजेस समझी। आफ्टर इकोनॉमिक कॉजेस वी विल स्विच टू सोशल कॉजेस। नाउ वी विल ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड द सोशल कॉजेस ऑफ द फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन। सी द सोशल कॉजेस। During the 17th and 18th century, the French society was divided into 3 estates. French society was divided into 3 estates. What were the 3 estates? The first was the king or the clergy class. Clergy means a person related to the functions of the church, or the person who is working in a church as a priest. It is known as the clergy class. They form the topmost class of the France. Second one was the nobility class. Who were the nobility class or the aristocrat class? People associated with the service of the king, they basically form the noble class or the aristocrat class, associated with the functions related to the king or the royal house. And feudals also were there. The feudal society was also prevalent there. Feudals means a person who own a large amount of land, and different peasants and agricultural laborers used to work there. They were basically called the feudals. In Hindi we called it samant, which was prevalent in ancient India. So the feudal societies. And the third estate was the common people. But in this common people there was also a variety. What was the variety? Some people were rich in this particular category and some were also poor. Like, who constitute the third estate or the common people? So this was the third estate. This was the second estate of the French society, and this was the first estate of the French society. In third estate there were merchants, there was businessmen, there was educated lawyers, professionals, teachers. This class basically formed the elite class of the common people. What other peoples were included in the common people as well? The first one was this. Second was the peasants, which constitutes the majority of the people in the France. There were peasants, there were agricultural laborers, there was also serf. Serf means basically a slave who work in the agriculture field. There was also serfdom, which was widely prevalent in the French Revolution. So serf, agriculture laborers, the peasants, they all constitute the common people. Even women were also included in the common part. It should be noted that women belonging to the noble class and even from the clergy or the topmost class of the society, they were excluded from many rights. Like they don't have any political rights, very little access to the education as well. So women always used to face discrimination, whether it is in the common class, the noble, or the king or the clergy classes. Even after the French Revolution, women were denied of their right to vote. So we'll understand this as well in this chapter. So this was the basically division of the society during the French Revolution, and this division of the society was prevalent right from the medieval ages or from the old regime ages. Old regime. The old regime society was basically a feudal society, and it was continuing during the French Revolution. What is the old regime? Basically the time period before 1789 AD. Before the French Revolution, the time period is basically called the old regime. And this was the structure of the old regime. This was the structure of the old regime. And what do you mean by the old regime? Old regime basically means the time period before the 1789. This is basically we call the old regime time period. So these were the parts where society was divided, the first, second, and the third estate. Now, generally, we'll try to understand what were the problems with these common masses, why they revolted. In society, there was always the discrimination towards the common masses. The discrimination was widely prevalent. The discrimination on what basis? The discrimination on the tax basis. The discrimination on the land distribution basis. If I talk about the land distribution, almost 60% of the land holding of France was under the first two estates. First two estates. Both of these two estates were formed of small population, but they hold almost 60% land of the France. So this is one of the also major reasons that there was unequal distribution of the land among the society. First thing, the land distribution. Now we will talk about the special privileges of the both these class. See, so here we understand the society. After understanding the society, we understand the word old regime, that this society was continuing from the old regime time period, and old regime means the time period before 1789, and the common masses of the common people were facing the discrimination. Discrimination in what? See, the taxation system, the land distribution system. What was the land distribution system? 60% of the France land belongs to the first two estates, and rest 40% was distributed among the common people, which constitutes almost 90% of the society. So now we will try to understand, after land distribution, what were the privileges given to the first and second estate of the society. See, both the estates were given some privileges. Their privileges were basically by birth. They have more political rights as compared to the common masses. They constitute a small population but hold large land. Portion. They constitute the small population, but they hold the large land portion in France. So first estate and second estate have privileges by birth. They have more political rights. They constitute the small population, but have large land portion under them. The most important factor was that all of the first and the second class people were exempted from paying tax. This was the main reason that the common people revolted. It means the whole of the burden of the tax was on the common people of the France. The first two classes doesn't pay even a single penny of the tax to the government. So whenever there will be increase in the tax, then all of the burden goes to the common people, and this is what the immediate cause of the French Revolution. So this was the first estate. They were exempted from paying taxes. They have some special rights. They have privileges by birth. They hold a large land portion, the first and the second estate. Now we come to the third estate. The third estate was the common people. What were the sufferings of the common people during the French Revolution? Let's consider this. See, the third estate. The third estate, and especially in third estate, I'm talking about the peasants. because inside the third estate almost 80% for the peasants especially. See, first thing that they don't have privileges, no privileges at all, no special or political rights. No special or political rights were accorded to this class. They have to pay the tax. They have to pay the tax to the king or to the feudal as well. The peasants have to render services. The peasant have to render services to landlord, to king. Even peasants were forcefully recruited into the French army as well and were paid very less as well. The peasants were paid very less. They used to give services to the king, the landlord. They have to pay the taxes. There is no special rights, no privileges to the third estate people. So you can clearly see the distinctions which were in the society, that they have the privileges and they don't have some privileges, and they were treated as like the slaves. And also there were slaves also which were against the whole regime, because France and Britain used to do the slave trades during the colonial period, 16th, 17th, 18th century. The slaves were basically brought from the Africa. So this was the problem of the third estates, that they don't have privileges, no special right. They have to pay the taxes, render services to the lord or the king. They have to go through the army as well. And what were the taxes? See, church also used to take taxes from them. So let me rub this. What were the taxes they used to pay? The church used to take taxes from them. Even the king used to take taxes from them. There were two types of taxes, indirect and direct. Church used to grab tax which was known as tithe. The tithe tax was given as 1/10 of total agricultural produce. Total agricultural produce. This was the tithe tax. First, it was taken by the church from the common people. You can understand, even during that time, the period of Renaissance was also going there. Renaissance means the rebirth, the new ideas in the society. This period was also going in Europe during the French Revolution, because people used to follow blindly the church. Now, there were many myths which were people following the church, and many myths were broken by later scholars regarding to the church. So the first was the tax paid by the people to the church. Second, they also pay tax to the king or the state. There were two types of taxes. One was the direct tax, which they used to pay. The direct tax was basically called taille. This was the direct tax which they used to pay in livres. Livres was basically the French currency during that time. There was also indirect taxes which they have to pay. Who have to pay? Only this common. They were exempted from this. Indirect taxes were on the salt, tobacco. These were and other food items. These were on the item. These were the indirect tax. This was the direct tax, and this was the tax which was collected by the church. That is 1/10 of the total agriculture produce. So you can see clearly that common people have the burden of paying the taxes to render the services to the king, to the monarch, to the lords, princes, and also they have to work in the army, even at the low wages as well. So this class was basically exploited. This class was basically exploited by the church as well, the king as well. So, and the king and the nobles of the king as well. The nobles, or I can say that the feudals as well. This was the basic problem in the society. So the social cause was that the society was divided into three parts, and the third part, common people, doesn't have any special right or special privileges. Why? Because they all have to pay the taxes, they have to render the services to the king. Taxes were of many types, like the church collect the tithe taxes, the direct taxes were the taille, indirect taxes were on the salt, tobacco. So this was basically the structure of the society in France, and this common people, even the merchants used to pay taxes, the businessmen used to pay taxes, and tax was also not uniform in the France. Many feudals used to collect heavy taxes, and then they used to pay some half amount to the king, and rest of the amount were left to the feudals. This was the social cause of French Revolution. So social cause is clearly understandable that these three estates, and in the three estates both were exempted and have special privileges, but the common people doesn't have any special privileges and have the burden of these taxes. So if the king raised the taxes, who will bear the burden? The common people will bear the burden of the tax. This was the basic and one foremost reason that common people revolted against the king. So social causes are clear, and after completing the social causes, we will switch to the political causes of the French Revolution. Political causes of the French Revolution. So what we have understood till now, the first was the economic causes. As I told you about the 13 colonies to liberate, the Palace of Versailles, the loans taken by the French government, even worsen the situation of the society and also the French government. Second was the social causes. Why? Because society was basically divided into three estates, and first two estates were exempted from the taxes, and third estate used to pay all the taxes to the king or the noble class. This was the societal structure of the French during the French Revolution. And now we come to the third cause, that was the political cause. Political cause. What is the political cause? See, the king considered himself as the representative of the god. During the 17th, 18th century, there was a myth, or there was a belief in the European society that the king is the representative of the god. And this was also assured by the church as well, that king is the representative of the god, and everybody in the society, even the rich class or the poor class, everybody had to bow down in front of the king and have to obey the orders of the king. Why? Because the king is the representative of the god, and everybody follow blindly things which are related or associated with the god as well. The king first consider themselves as representative of the god. Representative of the god. During 15th, 16th and 17th century, there was many myths which were prevailing in the society of the Europe. Like there was a myth in the church as well, selling of the indulgences. Indulgence basically means to do something for your own personal satisfaction or for your own luxury. Selling indulgences from the church was a myth that whoever purchased that indulgence paper, he will be free from all the sins that he had committed during that time. This was also going in the society. Second was that the king was considered as the representative of the god. So it means whatever the order the king used to give, whether it is reasonable or not reasonable, justifiable or not justifiable, everyone have to obey the order of the king. Why? Because he is representative of the god. God means the Almighty. First thing was that. Second thing about the political causes is that there was absence of rights of people. Basically the common people, they don't have any rights, they don't get any type of security from the government, they don't get any type of security from the government. Government means, I mean to say, the autocratic monarch of the France. Who was that time? Louis XVI, the autocratic monarch. Second thing. Third thing was that there was nothing like the concept of the liberty. There was nothing like the concept of the freedom. People were also illiterate during that time, and they don't know about their rights. The illiteracy was widely prevalent in the France during that time. So illiterate people, they don't know the freedom, they don't know the concept of liberty, they don't know about their own rights, they don't have any security from the government, and there was also the discrimination, because that was the rule by law and not rule of law. There is a difference. See, there are two things, the rule of law and the rule by law. What is the basic difference? Rule of law means that rule is binding to each and everyone. Everyone is equal in the eye of the law, whether rich or poor, male or female, no discrimination, and everybody is equal. The king or the common mass, everyone is equal in the eye of the law. This is known as the rule of law. What do you mean by the rule by law? It means using the law as a tool in the society to discriminate. to accord the unequal rights, means using the law as a tool for benefits of some people in the society on the cost of the other people's right. So this is the rule by law which was going in the France during that time. There was no constitution during that time. So this was basically the political reasons that king considered himself as the representative of God. There was no rights, no security, no liberty, freedom. Illiteracy was widely prevalent, no constitutions, only the autocratic monarch, and rule was ruled by the law. Whatever the king and the nobles will decide, that rule will be followed by each and every man in the society. So it clear cuts demarcate the pathetic conditions of the common masses in the society. So three reasons were clear: the economic reasons, France get worsened day by day; the societal reasons, where we studies the three estates of the society and what was the discrimination that they were following in that estate; the political causes, that king considered as representative of the god. Instead of it, later the philosophers who come, they used to tell that king is not the representative of the god, but it is clearly a myth. Many people used to say this, and there must not be representative of the god. The man who head the government, he must be representative of the people. He must be accountable to the people of the society. He must not be accountable to God. Okay, so this was the basically political cause, and after political cause we will understand a growing middle class in the society. This middle class used to have changed their ideas, their way of lifestyles, and this middle class also revolted against the king. They make the whole of the French society aware about their own rights. So after political causes, so first we study the economic causes, second was the social causes, and third was the political causes. After understanding all three causes, there was also D point. D point was the growing middle class, or we can consider it as a growing merchant class. What were the merchants? Who were the merchants? See, many people in the society starts to trade. The trade was widely prevalent during this time in 17th, 18th century, and this was also an era of industrialization. So England was very ahead as compared to others countries of the Europe. England was ahead in industrialization, but this middle class people of new middle class engaged in trading activities. What were the basically trading activities? The first thing was the expanding the trade overseas. France have many colonies, even Britain have many colonies worldwide, and they used to trade in that colonies particularly. Like India was the colony of the Britain. What Britain used to do, they used to manufacture cheap goods in England, and then they supplied again to the colonies, and whatever the raw materials they required for the production, they take from the colonies. So taking the raw materials from the colonies, manufacturing that product, cheap products in their own country, and then reselling it again in the colonies. This was the basically trend during that time. So this middle class was also engaged in this trade. What they used to trade about, that woolen clothes, woolen textile, cotton. This was the trade going during that time. This trade was overseas. This middle class also constitutes of the educated people. This middle class also constitutes of the educated people, the elite class, educated class, like who? The professors, the teachers, lawyers, and some people from the common masses who went into the bureaucracy of the king. They were also included in this class, bureaucracy, in the administrative part. Bureaucracy, administrative, lawyers, teachers, professors, educated elite, woolen, textile, cotton, doing trade overseas. The middle class was aware about education. They were aware about their own political rights, and they always lay emphasis about educating a man, so that he must be aware about his own rights. what were the emphasis of the middle class? Their emphasis was always on the education, awareness. They used to study a lot of ideas of different philosophers, and they believed that the government must not be headed by the king, but the government must be headed by the representative of the people. This was the basically idea of middle class that was widely prevalent in the society, that the government should be formed from the representative of the people, and it should not be formed just on the as representative of God. So this was the idea of the middle class. They used to work like expanding the trade overseas, woolen, textile, educated elite, professor, teachers, lawyers, they all were in the middle class. This was the new middle class which was emerging in the society. They talk about their rights, they talk about the education. Okay, so these were their demands during that time, and they also want a uniform economic system. Uniform economic system in the state, so that they don't have to pay taxes again and again. Like there were like custom taxes, indirect taxes, direct taxes. The middle class want that there should be a uniform taxation system throughout the country. So they were also demanding for the uniform economic system, representative of people. They said that there should not be the king, but there should be something like republic or the democracy or the constitutional monarchy. Who constitute the middle class? The bureaucracy, administrative part, lawyers, teachers, professional education elite, the merchant class, basically the merchant class who used to go trade in far seas and take ideas from that area to the France. This was the growing middle class and their activities, which was basically driving the French Revolution, or basically one of the cause of the French Revolution. Because already the economic, social and political reasons were the worst, and the new society which was emerging in the France, it was also aware about their own rights. So this was the fourth reason that French Revolution caused take place: the economic, social, political. And this merchant class always used to teach the illiterate people, the peasants, that you have some rights and you have to fight for your own rights. So this was the middle class, and after understanding the growing middle class, we will come to understand the new point. And this new point is about who were the intellectuals during that time period, like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, like John Locke, Montesquieu. They propounded many theories in the society, and people follow their ideas. People discuss their ideas in the coffee shops, in the salon. And after discussing these ideas, why they used to discuss? They used to read aloud also, because to teach the illiterate population who don't know how to read and write. So this was the system going in the France during the French Revolution time period. So we have understood the four basic reasons of the French Revolution: the economic reason, the social reason, the political reason, and the growing middle class reason as well. And now we will switch to the next reason, the intellectual reasons. What are the intellectual reasons of the French society? So note these four reasons, and now we will switch to the next reasons of the society. So far we have studied the economic reasons, the social reasons. The society was divided into three parts, three estates. Third was the political reasons, that king was the representative of the god, and there was no special rights which were accorded to the third class or the common class or the common masses. They have to pay the taxes, they have to pay the services as well. And fourth reason was that the growing new middle class. Growing new middle class. This middle class was basically the merchant class who used to trade overseas. This was they also belong to some professors, some intellectuals. This was also some lawyers who always talk about education, rights, awareness, equality, freedom of what? Freedom of individual. That freedom of individual matters. No one should be deprived of their rights. This was basically demand of this new middle class, and it was emerging in the French society during the 17th century. Next point is that the first one, the second reason, the third reason, the fourth reason, and what was the fifth reason of this? That the intellectuals who educated this middle class, the intellectual people who educated this middle class for their economic, social, and political rights. These were the intellectuals who educated this middle class, and also the common peasants as well. Ideas of these intellectuals were spread in the society of the France and make people aware about their own rights. So, and these intellectuals break many myths which was prevailing in the society during that ages. What was the myth and how they break? Let us talk about it. First intellectual I will talk about, he was John Locke. Who was the John Locke? See, John Locke was an English philosopher. He breaks many myths which is prevalent in the society. What philosophers used to do? See, philosophers used to do logical thinking. They believe or lay emphasis on the critical thinking of a person. And all these philosophers doesn't used to talk about the divine things. They used to talk about the humanities, the human-centric talks. So what were the human-centric talks of the John Locke? See, John Locke was an English philosopher. He was very efficient in his philosophy. He wrote, his notable work was the two treatises of government. Third thing, he is also known as father of liberalism. What basically liberalism means? Liberalism, liberty, liberal, or the liber. All of the word basically come from the Latin word liber, which means free. But free under what? It doesn't mean totally free, but there are two things. There must be presence of security and conditions from the government side, and as well as the absence of unjust or unreasonable constraints on an individual. Liberty basically means that there must be presence of conditions, or we can say that facilities by government to individual for his own growth. Like Indian government used to provide education free of cost, health facilities free of cost, or at very minimum cost. Why? Because they want the human development. This is the part of the positive liberty. That means something present. What is the present? The conditions and facility by the government for the individual development. Second thing is about the liberty or liberalism is that there must be absence of what? So it basically doesn't mean the freedom. It is the part of freedom. Freedom means the absence of all type of constraint. But liberty said that there must be constraints, but constraints must be reasonable constraints for the growth of the individual. So absence of what? Absence of unjust or unreasonable constraints in the society. Unreasonable constraint. Constraint means restrictions in the society. So absence of unjust, unreasonable constraints and the presence of conditions, facilities by the government, both basically combine the positive and the negative liberty, and this basically means the liberty. So liberty constitutes of two things. The first is the presence of the facilities or the conditions by the government, and along with conditions, government will also put some restrictions, but the restrictions must be reasonable. It should not be unreasonable restrictions. Like unreasonable restriction that among the three estates of the society, only the third estate will pay the taxes. This is an unjust restriction. This is an discrimination, a clear-cut discrimination. It is against the liberty. And second thing is the absence of unjust, unreasonable restrictions. And first one was the presence of the constraints or presence of the conditions or facilities by the society. This is basically meaning of the liberalism. What John Locke has propounded in his two treatises of the government. The first thing that John Locke propounded is the natural rights. Natural rights. what is the natural rights. By knowing this natural rights theory, people get to know that there is something like natural rights which actually exists in the society, and we don't know about this prior to John Locke. What was his natural rights? He said that every individual living in this world is created equal by God. And this individual have right. What right? Which was accorded to him by the nature or by the God, and no one else can deprive him or her of these rights. What were these rights? These rights are the right to live. No king, no noble, no feudal can deprive any individual in the right to live. Everybody have right to live. First. Second was the right to liberty. The right to liberty means both things, the absence and the presence. The absence of unjust construction, unjust constraints, and presence of conditions by the government for individual development. So life, liberty, and third was his right of property. That property should be distributed equally among each and everyone, because it is a nature gift and not developed by an individual. So natural rights basically means the right to live, right to liberty, and right to property. This was the basic idea of John Locke, which he propounded in his two treatise of the government. So you can understand that these types of ideas were followed by these middle class people, and these middle class people follow the education. And what was in the education? The humanist culture was developing in the education, the John Locke idea. Second thing, John Locke talked about that the myth of representative of God. He totally discarded this theory that a king is a representative of the God. He said the king is not a representative of the God. He totally break or discarded the myth that king is representative of God. King is neither representative of God and nowadays nor of also the people, because it is an autocratic monarch. He don't have any restriction, he don't have any external controls. Nobody can control. There is no constitution which can bind the king. So he said that this is basically a myth that king is representative of God, and this myth should be break in the society or discarded in the society. Many middle class people and even the common must get attracted to the ideas of the John Locke. His ideas about the king, about the natural rights, the divine theory that was propounded by the king, he discarded that. He talks about the natural, and he even used to say that if a king is not able to protect the right of an individual, basically which right? The natural rights. If king is not able to protect the life of a person, the liberty of a person, and the property of a person, then the king or the regime should be removed. The king or the regime should be removed. This was basically theory propounded by the John Locke. And after reading these revolutionary ideas, many middle class people thought that there must be representative of the people, and the representative of God theory was totally discarded. So this was the spread of the humanist education in the society. The first thing about the John Locke. And these ideas of John Locke were taken by the middle class. Second philosopher we will talk about, he is Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He was basically born in Geneva, which is in Switzerland presently, but then later he moved to the France, and he was working as a merchant, he was working as a servant in different houses, but he had a very intellectual knowledge of many things. Like Rousseau talk about the social contract theory, the same thing which he talk about in the natural rights, that there must be a government and the people, and there must be a social contract between the government and the people, and government should be binding towards that contract. Government should work for the life of the people, liberty for the person, freedom of the person. So this was the theory propounded by the Jean-Jacques Rousseau, which we will discuss now after John Locke. So what are the reasons? I'll again go to the economic reason. We have already studied the social reasons, the political reasons, and the growing middle class reasons. These were the middle class people, and what these were their demands. How their demands used to rise gradually by listening or reading to these intellectuals. And these intellectuals were like John Locke, Rousseau, the Montesquieu's theory of separation of the spirits of the law. These were the theories that generally a middle class person used to read and give these ideas to the common masses. that you are being exploited by the king or the noble class, and you have to fight against it, because it is our natural rights. It is the right given by the God to us, that we have right to live, right to liberty, right to property, right to work, and right to expand ourselves, right to develop ourselves, right to develop our skills also. So these middle class spread the ideas of John Locke, Rousseau, Montesquieu, and many other people. So first, about the John Locke, that he was an English philosopher. He gave the two treatises of the government, the father of liberalism. What the liberalism basically means, all of the word liberalism, liberty, liber means free. And it means that the presence of the external conditions, facilities by the government. When there will be the presence of external conditions or facilities by the government will also put some constraint as well. But the constraints should be reasonable constraints and justifiable constraints. It should not be unjust constraints. And the second thing is here that absence of unjust constraints in the society. Okay, so this basically means the liberalism. When this liberalism is in the sphere of the society, I mean to talk when we have liberal ideas in the society, that everybody is equal, there should be not any caste discrimination, then it is called social liberalism. When this liberalism theory is attached to the political science, that everybody have equal rights, nobody would be discriminated on the basis of the gender, caste, religion, race, anything. So it is political liberalism. And when this liberalism is added to the economy, that everybody have right to work, that everybody should be paid equally, there should be equality of income or minimum interference of the government in market players, then it is known as economic liberty. There are three types of liberty as well. The first is the political, social, and economic liberty. So here we basically means liberty means the rights of the freedom, the political liberty basically we are talking about here. These are the natural rights. Natural rights means the right to live, liberty and property, life, liberty and property. And also he discarded that theory that the king is representative of the god. It is totally a myth which was widely prevailing in the French society during the French Revolution time period, or 17th and the 18th century. So after John Locke, we will study about the Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He is another philosopher who talk about new ideas or the social contract theory. What was his basically social contract theory? Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He was another philosopher after John Locke. During that time period, Rousseau basically was born in Geneva and later he moved to the France. He was born in Geneva and later moved to France, and he was working as a servant in many houses. But as compared to his intellectual level, intellectual knowledge, he was very, very far ahead than other philosophers. What he used to do? He was a philosopher, also the critical thinker. His ideas inspired the French Revolution. His ideas inspired French Revolution. His ideas inspired the French Revolution basically. And what was his idea? The social contract theory. Rousseau propounded the social contract theory. What is this social contract theory? His ideas was also adopted by this middle class. What was the social contract theory? See, he used to say that there must be a contract between the government and the society. The government must be created of the autocratic monarch. It must be republic or democratic, whatever the government form the people used to choose. It can be of any form. Second, there is the common mass. There must be contract between both of them, that government will provide them liberty, means the presence and absence, presence of the conditions, facilities to the common mass, and also absence of what unjust restrictions or unreasonable restrictions. So this is the duty and responsibility of the government towards its masses, and in return the people will contribute to form the government, people will contribute to run the government, all people equally will contribute to run the government. It should not be divided like the noble or the clergy class will not contribute and they will not pay the taxes. Everybody, each and everyone, whoever is earning in the society will have to pay the tax. This was the basically meaning of the social contract theory. So Jean-Jacques Rousseau said that must be a contract. There must be a contract between society and the government. Society and the government, and the contract should be binding for both of them, even binding for the government. Why binding for the government he is talking about? Because during that time the king was the autocratic monarch, and there is no restrictions on the king's decision. He can take whatever decision, whatever he wants. He doesn't ask to anybody about his decision. He even don't check the repercussions of his decisions. And during this time, this thing also takes place when he increased the taxes. When it comes to the State General Meeting of the France, everybody have to vote for increasing the taxes, but the voting system was unique in the France. Like king and the noble class will only vote, and the common class or the third estate people, around there were 600 people during that time, their vote is considered one vote. Means 600 people vote is considered only one vote. So this was the political discrimination, societal discrimination, and also Rousseau said that it is against the social contract theory, that every person must have one vote. One person, one vote. So this was the contract of the Jean-Jacques Rousseau. After Rousseau, we will study the Montesquieu. So basically, in this chapter, we are still here in the French Revolution. What we have studied so far, I will revise this, and then after that, we will of the class, and next things we will continue on the Monday. So what was the things that we studied today? First thing was the introduction. I'm also combining the what I have taught in yesterday. So first thing was the introduction. The first thing was the introduction, and in introduction we studied the map of the France. After understanding the map, we studied about the Bourbon dynasty, which was ruling in the France, Spain, and also some portion of the Brazil as well. And after understanding that Bourbon dynasty, we understand that Louis XVI was the king during the French Revolution. He was married to Austrian princess Marie Antoinette. After understanding the Bourbon dynasty, we understand the society of the France. There was nothing like republic and democracy, but society was divided into three estates: the king, clergy, second the noble class, and the third was the common masses. And in common masses, they constitute the large portion. They have the large population, almost 80 to 90% of the French society, but their land holdings was very low. They used to pay the taxes as well. And after understanding this structure of the society, we came to the causes of the French Revolution. The first cause of the French Revolution was the economic causes. What were the economic causes? That France helped 13 colonies of America to get liberated. This was the first cause. Second, that he was building a palace of Versailles that cost very heavily. Second cause, the loan taken by the French government is increasing day by day. The French debt was rising day by day. And thereafter, the economic cause was that they have to increase the taxes to pay his debt. Second was the societal causes. Society causes, we understand that society was divided into three estates: the first, second, and the third estate. And the third estate used to pay all the taxes. They used to do all the services in army, in land fields, in agricultural fields. They were agricultural labor also. There was also serfdom. There were also slaves in the third society. But slaves were excluded from the third society, but they were part of the people who were exploited. Okay, so after this exclusion of this societal structure, we understand the social causes was also prevalent. Then the political causes, that king is the representative of the god. This was the theory during that time, and this theory was also propounded by the church as well. See, the religious places were also biased towards the king. Okay, the political theory. Then we understand the growing middle class was also the cause of the French Revolution, because these all middle class people, the merchant, professor, intellectual, lawyers, they all study about all these ideas. And from where these ideas arose? From the intellectual people like John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Locke propounded the theory of the natural rights, and he was considered as father of liberalism. And Rousseau talks about the social contract theory. And in the next class, we will understand about Montesquieu and other reasons for the French Revolution, and thereafter we will start with the outbreak of the revolution.